Welcome to Consent Dojo. This month, we are going to go behind the curtains or behind the clipboard, if you will, and talking about privacy, consent, secrecy with therapists, right, on their side. So, again, this is Consent Dojo. This is my ongoing monthly YouTube and live Zoom, exploring all sorts of nuance about consent. Consent may seem simple, but it's not easy. It's incredibly nuanced. And I think lately we've been talking of consent in a very uh, clear binary. It is or it isn't, and you either and where people talk mostly about it in terms of sexuality, but it's every day. It's really uh, about being human and being social creatures. So the objective of Consent Dojo, I'm not teaching. I'm inviting my amazing friends and colleagues who have very unique perspectives. So I, like you, the viewer, have a lot to learn, and it's been such a joy. So we gather every month and talk about things and explore deeper into topics in hopes of building our consent muscle. Oh, yeah. And I want to invite you to this conversation that I'm having with my friend Ilyssa, who I've been really enjoying getting to know. And if you haven't seen the video where Ilyssa appeared for as a guest presenter in my Patreon, talking about Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld, how a dude in a dress terrified Nazis. You bet. So check it out. We'll put that in the link in the link in the chat box and all that. And if you're viewing this later, it'll be in the details of the video. This is available free for anyone, and it's also on YouTube. It's made possible solely by my Patreon subscribers. So my Patreon subscribers are my sponsors and make such programs that I can make free available. So I want to give big thanks. So come join my Patreon, become part of the people that make good happen, that support me in my mission in education. It's patreon.com/Planet Midori. Enough with that. Ilyssa, tell us who you are.
Hi, I'm Ilyssa. Nice to meet y'all. Well, I guess really getting into why y'all are here today. I am here because I am a licensed clinical social worker with let me back up. My credentials and my job titles tend to have a bunch of AKAs. So, I am a therapist. I am a psychotherapist. And by that, that means that I have a clinical degree. I also have an education degree in human sexuality education. So I am what many would call a sex therapist. I prefer to refer to myself as a clinical sexologist. Um, but I am also a social worker. I am a psychotherapist. I am whatever buzzword fits my credentials and the topic I'm working at hand with people. That doesn't necessarily mean that everything I work with people is about sex. Um, it's just really important to be able to incorporate those pieces into traditional therapy, individual couples especially, and even sometimes group therapy. Now, the populations I work with include first responders, police, active service members, as well as military veterans, sexual minorities, LGBTQ, kink, poly, as well as uh, certified trauma therapists working with PTSD and parasomnias. And I know that sounds like so many random things, but I promise you they intersect a lot more than you think. Um, but in my journey in becoming a therapist, I have attended therapy quite a bit myself as well. Um, all for good things. Don't worry. We'll get into that. And it's just been very unique to be someone who has experienced the mental health field as a client on that side of the clipboard, sitting on that couch, as opposed to sitting on this side of the clipboard across from the couch. So that's kind of why I'm here today. And that's what we're going to check out.
Great. Now, okay, so we've got your job title and all of that. And how did you get into this?
Ah, now see, that is a question where we can start with the considerations of consent and limited disclosure. We'll get to some better definitions of consent, but because of my particular experience, I do like to let people know you can't unask questions that you ask, and we can only give a limited amount of disclosure. So, the nuts and bolts of why I'm here as a sex therapist, why I've done this my whole life as my life's calling, starts with growing up in a household where my mom was very open about us talking about human sexuality education, because my father actually passed away when I was quite young, from HIV. He was diagnosed and passed away from AIDS when I was 3 years old. So speaking about things in a non-sexual context was very accessible to me. And with that being said, my mom wanted to make sure that I would be mentally healthy and emotionally intelligent and self-soothing. So I have started therapy on and off since the age of 3. Yes, there is never too young of an age. So I am here today in the realm of mental health as somebody who's been on both sides of the clipboard, and human sexuality education as somebody who does not have a lot of inherent biases, because from the get, we were already looking at some big topics. So that's how I came to be.
And what was uh, what was schooling like? I think we had some conversation before about your advisor.
Oh, uh, uh,
Was that?
is that the story about at orientation?
Yeah.
Yes. Um, Well, there are only 2 schools in the United States that are PhD accredited for human sexuality degree. There's a couple of master's degrees, but I decided to attend Widener University. Now, on our first day of orientation, our dean said flat out to us, there is no thing as a sex therapist. And this is 1/3 of the people who had built this program blatantly telling us there's no such thing as a sex therapist. And we're all sitting there like, what the hell is he talking about? And he goes, you are clinicians that specialize in human sexuality, because the goal is that one day all clinicians will specialize in human sexuality. So you are a clinician first, and you have your expertise second. And he said, I'll never forget this. He said, the job that you want doesn't exist. You're going to have to carve your own path. And that's pretty much what every single person in my graduating class has had to do in various arenas: mental health, education, personal consultations. We have all had to carve our own path, because we knew that what we had to provide in our drive was something people could benefit from, but not necessarily that those spaces existed quite yet. So, inch by inch, therapist by therapist, we're spanning the field.
Excellent. And thank you for your hard work. Now, let's dive into consent and the realm of your work. So take it away.
Right. Well, first things first, consent. It's important to consider that consent is the active cooperation and desire to be a part of something, to agree to do something, to co-sign off on something else that's going on without coercion. So oftentimes that's the piece many people get hung up on. So willing, ready, and super stoked. Enthusiastic consent doesn't just have to be about sex. Do you want to go to the ice cream store? Hell yeah, I want to go to the ice cream store. That is consent in a nutshell. So consent in therapy is a little bit different. It's a little trickier of a situation because when people come inside that door, they have signed papers that they have a consent to treatment. They have signed papers for consent to telehealth treatment because now there's more paperwork nowadays. They have signed, if they're a couple, a limited secrets policy, as well as confidentiality to their personal information and notes. So I'm not going to steal your information and sell it to, like a TV producer or hackers that, want your mom's social security number. Everything that's shared in therapy is confidential, but that doesn't mean that a therapist has the right to every piece of information or things we just kind of are curious about. That tends to be something that therapists get caught up in. Am I looking at this because I'm curious? Am I looking at this because it's beneficial to the client? So that being said, I like to create an environment of consent the second someone comes in the store. And I think we actually may have a video of me doing a POV, you're my new client, and this is the tour of my office. So perhaps people can see a little bit more about what consent looks like in a casual, organic fashion, and not simply a, do you agree to this? Do you agree to this? And how can it be applied in a relaxed way?
You have an office tour, right? So do you want to do that? I'm going to pop off the stage so the screen is a little bit bigger. Folks, if the audio is a little wonky or if you can't hear it well enough, let us know, please.
Absolutely. Let me see if I can pull this up here real quick. I think I closed a tab. My apologies. Office tour open. Okay. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to. Oh, nope. Oh gosh, darn it, just a moment. Share screen. And I want to share this here. Oh, are we able to? Oh gosh. Oh, are we able to see the image of a door and a couch?
Looks good.
All right. Now, as you had just said, some of the audio might be a little low because I'm a bit of a distance from the camera that's recording, but we're going to do our best. So let us know if the audio is an issue. Here we are. This is what happens when you come into my office, as authentic as I was able to record. I'm just going to rush to the restroom real quick, and then we can get started with the tour, and we'll move on inside. So the tour actually starts in this room. With me, there's a first aid kit right down here in this box, as well as the garbage over here. Hand sanitizer, tissues, alcohol prep pads, and people like to write down their phones, masks. Masks are optional, but I do want to give you that caution for that. So if you'd like to come take a seat on the big yellow couch. How to get a shot of those degrees. Doors are hallway in the waiting room that will remain unlocked, but this door is locked. If you can see behind my chair, there is also a door behind my chair that is locked because this office is a little bit bigger than it looks. I actually built these bookshelves, so on the other side is my desk. But we don't need to see that because it's really messy. So in this room, we have garbage, tissues, hand sanitizer, fidget toys, and can I get your water? Oh, lovely. And any snacks or anything, because much we're to offer people, just make it comfortable.
change your mind. So when you come in, I will offer you a water bottle each time you come in. Before we do the spiel, any questions about the board? Right, so, well, first things first. I want to thank you for coming. As someone who's been on both sides of the clipboard, I do recognize the vulnerability that it takes to have the courage to come and discuss some things that are a little difficult. So, just want to honor that in the room and say thank you for coming. That being said, everything we share in this room is confidential. The only things I am mandated to report is abuse of children, elderly, or disabled, as well as active homicidal or suicidal ideation. Now, that doesn't include self-harm. There is any presenting self-harm. I'd like to work on harm reduction strategies, being able to make this a safe space so that you know I will never be making a phone call without your knowledge. It doesn't mean that I will not be making phone calls if needed in emergency, but I will never be making a phone call without your knowledge. Okay? So, also, we have a 15-minute timer to run my phone to let us know when you have 15 minutes left. Make sure that you get the whole hour that you need. It takes some people a little bit to warm up, so treat everything that we can info. That being said, I also took paper notes. We'll be doing some typing on the computer today. The notes are confidential. It'll look like I'm typing a lot, but I go back and bullet point it, get submitted. Nobody can see your notes. Nobody can see your paper notes, but if you would like to ask to see your notes, you can ask at any time. I'll show you what's on the clipboard. It's usually just a question that I'm waiting to ask for when there's a break in the conversation or keeping track of the timeline, conflict with mom on vacation, et cetera, et cetera, so I can follow the story that you're sharing. But other than that, any questions before we get into the meeting today? Good call. So, get started.
So there we have my tour of my office. Was the sorry, I'm just fixing this. Was the audio okay for everyone to hear a little bit?
Audio was a little bit hard. I think next time we put this on YouTube where it'll play more smoothly. I might even put it on YouTube and then connect it if that's all right by you. But
Yeah.
okay, so that gives a perspective of what it's like. Now let's dive into this. You've got on the power dynamics and therapist and I think a lot of people here are curious about what's happening on your side of the clipboard, so go on ahead.
Right. Well, well, first I just want to address that I use that example to show that there is ongoing informed consent in my practice. I will not make a phone call without you knowing. Informed consent. Here are where the exits are. Informed consent. Do you have any questions? I ask more than once. Informed consent. This ongoing process is really important to create a safe space in the office, because we're, it's not the same as having guests over, but you would want to make guests comfortable, which is a really good segue to look at emotional support human versus friend. So a lot of people come in to therapy and don't necessarily have deep emotional relationships with people. So to have a sounding board, to have someone in confidence, to have somebody that holds these things that you don't share with others can create a very strong bond. Now, sometimes when a client starts to feel a closer personhood to you, or that you remind them of their aunt, or things like that. That is called transference, where somebody is transferring their emotional proxies from their life onto you. Now, there is also the same thing that exists for therapists that we're trained on keeping in mind for countertransference if our clients are causing that for us. And the first thing to do in that instance, if your client or your clinician starts to feel like a friend, is to address the elephant in the room. Because with informed consent and with addressing things that may be a little sticky, we can keep the lines of communication open without having to shut it all down. But when it's the instances where we need to shut it all down, that's the conversation where we find out that we need to make some referrals. If I look like your ex-girlfriend and you had a very bad falling out with her, and that's going to impede your progress, maybe we refer to somebody who doesn't look like your ex-girlfriend so that you can have a comfortable space to share. Now, with that sense of friendship that people sometimes project onto their therapist, and they'll be like, oh, I wish I could invite you to board game night, like you would fit so well in our friend group. And I go, I bet I would. That's why we mesh so well. It's scientifically proven that it is not the modalities you use as a therapist. It is not how good of a therapist you are, even though I am a pretty good therapist. It's the mesh that goes on between a client and a clinician. So it's very hard to navigate that line between a good mesh and developing friendship. So someone says that would be amazing if we had met in a different time or place, but that doesn't mean I can accept any invitations to anything that people would love for me to come join, things like that. The closest you'll get to that is if we're in group therapy and we go on a field trip. That's it. That's close as you're getting to hanging out with me. Sorry, I know I'm awesome, but
So question for you. Then I think this could be confusing for many folks on both sides of the clipboard. What is the distinction between being friendly, and caring about another person? Liking and caring about another person.
Okay. Well, being friendly seems to be a social nicety. We can be friendly to someone at the post office, and when we're trying to create a comfortable space, we want to be friendly. No more of that Freud blank slate stuff. We want to have a personable human experience. So a good clinician will do what level of friendly fits their personality. Friendship being someone that you want to spend time with, someone that you are equally invested in, that there is a bilateral exchange. My clients don't know much about me. They may know bits or pieces that I've shared for relatability, normalization, but they don't know me as a person. So we can't technically be friends even under this framework, given how do you be friends with someone you don't really know? And how do you be friends with someone who has the power dynamic of knowing all of your secrets? It's a little uneven there. And as far as caring for someone, did you mean developing feelings in a therapy space? Something to that effect?
No, I think I meant more in the terms of, okay, so I'm on the coach side of things, right? Okay. And I even have friends that have sought me out for coaching, which is a very different thing than therapists, right? And when my friends have sought me out for coaching, so for example, Patreon Success or coaching on how to get involved in the kink subculture, I can be friends or not friend, but teacher. But let's say I can be, this is with my friends. It's a very limited topic. Okay, so you want to go to Dark Odyssey, you've never been, you want to pay me for my time to help you to succeed in this specific case, which is very different, I think, than therapy land. I'm still holding in confidence what the person's sharing with me, and I can still go to their game night, and they may or may not tell their friends that they're working with me on creating their Patreon or how to go to their first kink event. In that case, I think it's very different. I do care as friend. I also care as my client's success in that specific subject matter, right? And what I was asking of you is caring as a person who wants to do better, like a basic humanistic care.
All right, so just giving a fuck about people, it sounds.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yeah. Well, all of us are in this field of mental health for a limited amount of reasons. We've either seen some shit, done some shit, been through some shit, or there's a savior complex. Those last ones you can probably spot a mile away. But we're here because we do care. We're
Mm.
not here because of the money. If we were here for the money, we'd be MDs. We would have gone straight for the psych meds, script off. We'll see you next time in 3 months. But we are here because we care as a compassionate confidant. So, in looking at the parallels with coaching, or the things that may be different, privacy versus secrecy. Privacy is something that you want to keep to yourself. Doesn't matter what it is. That's fine. Secrecy is something you want to keep from other people. So the intention there is important. When someone is signing up for advice and coaching so that they can move forward, there's a sense of privacy there. There is an honor that you're taking to be their confidant, give them guidance, but there is no necessarily HIPAA or legal obligation you have to keep their secrets secret.
Correct.
So as a therapist, I have to keep their secret secret, provide a sense of privacy, and then also navigate in the office what secrecy looks like when you're holding something from yourself. Not even secrecy from outside parties, but what are you keeping from yourself? There's a lot of layers: privacy, secrecy, consent. It's a whole lot. Um,
So
um,
this is where my work on coaching and educator and your work as therapist, this is why I have so many friends and colleagues who are therapists, because there's realms in which I refer to therapists. It is, and I think this is an interesting distinction for the viewers. So you know, they're looking at the two of us on screen. Why work with me? Why work with you? It's not my job to help the internal conversation with the secret from self, but it is my job. And I might even hear secrets. I will often hear secrets, and I will keep that private because of my personal and professional ethics. However, it would also be within the realm of my work to say, this information you're about to share with me is beyond the scope. May I refer you to a suitable therapist and mental health professional?
no, absolutely. I think that consideration for your personal morals and ethics is a really good highlight that shows that you are a good coach. That shows that you are a good educator. That shows that you are a good confidant, because that is not legally required in your job. That is mandated in mine. The ethics, there are every year or so, in order to maintain our license, we have to do continuing education units, which means we have to take a couple classes, stay up to date on things. And each time there will be requisites on SUI and SI, being able to identify that, mandated reporting for abuse, as well as ethics. And if you want to become a supervisor, you have to complete more training courses on ethics. And the best part about all of these ethics trainings is in every single one of them, they say ethics is very confusing and sticky on a case-by-case basis, even though we're working with a very strong guideline. So the examples they can give can be relatable, but they're openly acknowledging the nuance to what is ethical. So when it comes down to someone sharing lifelong passive SUI ideation, mandated reporting would require me to call every time I see them, even if they've felt this way since their age of 8. So I need to be able to develop a really strong rapport with this client to be able to express to me when passive may become active. So there's an amount of trust that goes there while still recognizing the power dynamic that this person could make a phone call on your behalf. And then are they going to tell your emergency contacts? What if your emergency contacts are the ones that you're in conflict with? What
Mm.
are we going to share between couples in their breakout sessions? Because when you see a couple, you see the duel together, check in with this person, check in with this person, duel together. You do breakouts as needed, right? The limited secrecy consent form that you sign off on that is I'm not going to disclose everything in our last session in our next session's recap. I'm not going to. I'm not going to tell your wife that you are cheating on her, but I am going to encourage you to open that dialogue and kind of corral you to that being a subject that needs to be discussed. And if you're not ready and comfortable for that, I will understand that decline of consent, and we will have to look at other therapies that are available because I'm not going to break my ethics and morals of consent. I'm not going to drop a bomb on someone else's life, but I'm also not going to hide something from someone, which includes emergency contacts. You will typically list an emergency contact for what if something happens? That doesn't mean that person has access to your notes. That doesn't mean I'm going to be calling up that person after every session and telling them how it went. That is, if there's any mandated phone calls that need to be made, that's the person we reach out to. When you sign off on an emergency contact, it is for emergencies only.
What does happen when the conflict, trauma, or endangerment is from the person that they just listed as emergency contact?
That's when different forms of safety planning come into place. Now, I don't work with children,
Uh-huh.
so I'm not in a position, a very difficult position of sending the child back home to somewhere that may be dangerous. Now, every therapist, and in many states, you should probably check out each state's law, mandated reporters have to reach out regarding even a suspicion of abuse. And in some states, it's just professionals, and in other states, it's any citizen. So y'all might want to look that up, just in general. But I'm not working with a population where I would be sending people home to dangerous places, but that isn't to say that if I'm working with an individual who is in a DV situation, because we are also not allowed to tell you to break up or stay with someone.
Okay, for the room, DV is domestic violence or
Yes,
intimate partner violence. Mhm.
yes. Intimate partner violence, uh, um, those toxic cycles of uh, power and control that people are trying to get out of. People are trying to escape. They're trying to find safety.
Mhm.
I can help them look at a safety planning. I can help them create exit strategies. I can help them find safe houses, a friend to stay with, other options. I can give them resources. But once they leave the other side of that door, I cannot be that resource. So to make myself that resource ultimately makes their resources limited and potentially inaccessible outside office hours. So it's about building what they'll need.
So, I could see that somebody, when starting a relationship with a therapist, a clinician relationship, that they might just automatically put in a name, right? Because emergency contact.
Yeah.
What do you do when are people able to change who their emergency contact is? And what constitutes an emergency? Are we talking about fell down the stairs on the way to the therapist's place and like twisted their ankle? Are we talking what's the emergency here?
Well, in that particular example, it might be, because that might be who can drive them home. But again, I would say, do you want me to call your emergency contact to give you a ride home? Or what are we looking at here? But I'm sorry, could you repeat the first half of the question?
Oh, okay, so let's say that, I'm Jane Doe
Mhm.
and I start a therapy relationship with you and I fill out the forms and I put in my domestic partner's name because that's who I always put in as an emergency contact, like when I go to the gym or whatever.
Yes. At least with my telehealth platform, which I believe is true with most, and even when people are only working with paper, you can update your emergency contact whenever you want to.
Mhm.
Some people will change it to a parent or a sister, sorry, parent or a sibling, but you can change it whenever you want to. You also have access to change whether or not the therapist can email you at the email you provided, call you at the phone number you provided, text you at the phone number you provided, or reach out to your home. You can say, I don't want any of these contacts. It does limit the therapist's ability to exchange information with you outside of a session hours, but you have absolutely every right to decline something that might be a shared account with someone who is dangerous to go home to.
So, okay, again, Jane Doe example, and let's keep this in adult population because dealing with minors is a whole different issue. So let's keep this kind of limiting because this is a lifetime of discussion. So, Jane Doe, okay, and let's say that I am unpartnered. And in like a standard gym example, who would I put in as an emergency contact? I don't know. What considerations would you advise me if I said, I don't know, I'm single. Who do I put in emergency contact? I'm an only child. I don't have siblings, and my parents are deceased. What? Who do I put?
Well, I would suggest a trusted friend that you would feel comfortable knowing if they are being sought out to inform that there is some dangerous behavior, or that we've already made a phone call for someone to go to a facility or for someone to have a psych assessment. Someone that you trust to have that information, someone who is reliable and will pick you up when they say they're going to pick you up, or at least check in with you. Okay, you got there. Now you're going to take the Uber home. I don't think they let you Uber home from psych assessments, but they will let you Uber there because they're typically 24/7 walk-ins. But someone who is reliable, someone who is physically close, and they don't necessarily get the information as to why this is happening.
Ah,
That's
okay.
your choice.
So there's a little bit of query in the chat room that I'm going to try to reinterpret. So again, I'm Jane Doe. I'm single, no parents, no siblings, and I am closeted. Closeted about whatever. Maybe closeted about substance use. Maybe closeted about my sexuality. Closeted about uh, mental health issues. I may have good friends. I may, to your advice, I go, huh, okay, well, I trust my friend um, Sam, but Sam doesn't know anything about my substance use, my mental health, my sexuality, uh, etc. I am closeted about something that I am seeing you about.
that's where we would be discussing before the phone call, what your safety plans are, what your resources can look like, and perhaps needing to use more public services.
Mhm.
Be it ride share for some of my disabled clients who don't have someone to drive them to or from appointments. That would be an opportunity of who to have drive them home. But as far as closeted information, again, secrecy versus
Secrets.
privacy. Is
Yeah.
this secret? That sounds like that may be why we're making an emergency phone call. We need to look at what safe resources and support systems exist. So at least someone is on the safety plan that's in the know.
Does
But
a person on a safety plan need to know my business?
if it's your safety plan,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
oh, no, but on the safety
Oh,
plan, oftentimes it'll have reach out to trusted support systems.
mhm.
So that would be you acknowledging I'm in an extreme situation. In order to make this work, in order to survive, I need to reach out to this person, whether I'm giving them information now or I'm telling them later. I need to make the wise decision for me, but I
Let's
can't.
see. Thanks for letting me uh, go for clarifications on this because there is a difference between, hey, I need a ride back because I twisted my ankle versus I need a ride back from a psych assessment or I'm having suicidal ideation.
Absolutely.
I've got some questions from the room, and I know there's a lot of other things you want to address, but do you have a moment for questions from the room?
Please, yes.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we only have like 90 minutes max because there's so much more to talk about. But and for folks who are viewing and are joining, just recently joining, we're going over the nuance and consideration about secrecy, privacy, and consent in the room with clinicians, as well as I'm probably going to want to ask you about how you handle your own boundaries. But let me go to the questions here. Okay. I have here, um, let's see. In my time with my therapist, I find I'm educating them on kink terms and expectations and way of negotiation and lots of other aspects of the culture. As a kinky person, should I look for another therapist or can I trust a therapist can still talk me through my issues and feelings? I have thoughts on this, but I want to hear yours.
Yes. While the emotional labor should not be on the client, um, if this is the only therapist someone has access to, or if this is a therapist that they've grown very close to, they need to be able to consider, is the hour I could be spending healing and navigating being used to educate someone else? And if it is, and it doesn't mean you don't like your therapist, but it does mean there may be somebody more competent out there. And your therapist should be able to notice at some point when they're asking so many clarifying questions that this isn't within their wheelhouse, and referring out would be the most ethical thing to do.
Yeah. What I'm seeing with my work, right? And oh, and to folks who are viewing, you don't have to have just one professional support system. You can have a lot of different professionals you work with. So when I'm training, helping professionals to be kink cultural savvy in the Sexual Health Alliance in a program called Kink Informed Certification, and part of the thing that we're trying to do is get folks up to a baseline and then some specialists further on. But for folks out there, you can have different helping professionals for different issues, dealing with specific trauma modality. So that is a very specific thing. I would hope that therapist would have a basic amount of knowledge where they're not engaging in just purient curiosity and struggling through the session hour. I hear this too often of clients paying to teach their therapists. Their therapist should be doing that on their own. However, a therapist who's may need to know just enough, so like understand the client's specific negotiation style.
Yes.
And negotiation is basic human communication. But if the therapist is like, well, that's, if you're into bondage, that is wrong and there's something wrong about you, it's also a different thing. I have, within the scope of my work, right, I deal with a tiny sliver. I have clients that have therapists for their couples issue, family issues. Therapist knows that they're kinky and that's not the primary issue, and that the client works with me on specific kink stuff. I have also had uh, been helping team. I've had clients who, this was really interesting. A client brought me into a therapy session with their longtime therapist.
Interesting. You're allowed to always invite someone in as long as the therapist approves it's appropriate. And they had you come in as their coach or
Yes,
colleague?
yes. And to strategize a plan for improved communication and dating goals.
Beautiful. That collaboration is, I love it. Perfect.
I was thrilled. Also, in this concept of privacy and secrets,
Mhm.
um, I was very clear that, and the therapist was also very clear that there were realms in which was none of my business. But there were also realms that the clinician had not thought about, which was the safer sex negotiation part and specific nuance communication in kink, but also how to assess events that were better suited for the individual. So I came in essentially as a technical expertise, if you will.
Absolutely. Consultant in
Yeah.
the room is a beautiful thing to have.
So that was exciting for all three of us.
I really like that. That was a really good
Yeah.
support
Now,
systems.
now granted, it does mean that those with privilege of time, resource, and money, this is more accessible.
Yes. Yes.
So, back to the question here, to the person who asked about that. Um, if you're spending a lot of time educating your therapist, you can set a boundary on that. Now, Ilyssa, how would you, would there be kind of a phrasing script that you might give them on how to tell the therapist, go figure it out on your own, it's your job?
If I was the client
Mhm.
and I'm talking to my therapist, okay. Um, uh, I guess personally, I'd be like, that's like so much longer than an hour. I sound much different as a therapist than as a client. Um, that would be like so much longer than the hour. So like, I'm just gonna like send you some stuff in an email afterwards because like I want to focus on this piece. But I know you need info, but like I want to focus on this piece. Or you can even Google it. Like it's super easy. I would speak in a very informal fashion. That's just my personal style, but you can blatantly say like, I feel like there's a better way to use my time today. Or, are you familiar with any resources that maybe you can check in on outside of session? I really wanted to use my time today for XYZ. You're allowed to advocate or redirect in your sessions as you see fit. And unless it's something that you're deflecting, your therapist should be more than willing to let you go in the direction that suits you because it's not our curiosity. And when it comes to sexual content, it's not always ignorance for why people may be asking. Sometimes it's sheer curiosity, and that is not our job. And that is not your job as the client to satiate somebody's curiosity.
As a client, how would I distinguish between, because there's a power dynamic, right? So if you're my clinician and I were the patient or the client, how would I distinguish between my therapist is asking me because she's getting towards something that I don't know because I'm not the professional, or this is not how I want to spend my hour? How do I distinguish between your purient curiosity versus you're getting to something?
Um, Personally, in my experience as a therapist, I will phrase my question and I will say, not a trick question. Or I will say, you've shared this. I could take that like 200 ways and I don't want to assume. So can you just clarify there? But somebody being like, what do you mean by that? Oh, wait, tell me more. Was it like this? Was it kind of like that? That excitement shouldn't be what's running the session. Like, sure,
Mhm,
we want to be able to mirror the vibe and energy level with our clients, but when it starts becoming a friendly interrogation, it's no longer about you.
mhm, mhm. And this is where there's a slight difference between your work and mine, because part of my work is um, cheerleading. I mean, cheerleading in the best possible way, right? You know, it's like running along with them as well as being at the goal line. There's a comment here on the side that I think is interesting, and they say, quote, "I think there's a big and important difference between being kink suspicious, kink aware, kink informed, kink friendly, kink educated, and kink engaged. Each would create different degree of safety feeling from client to their therapist."
Absolutely. 100%. That could apply to a variety of topics, but kink being a very, very specific topic there, that one has nuance of limited disclosure. So how your clinician can navigate the relatability there without compromising their own privacy is very delicate and would be a case by case basis with clients. You might
How
not
do you,
want, oh, sorry.
oh, go ahead.
I say you might not feel comfortable sharing with a particular client that you are familiar with, engaged in, experienced in the kink realm in certain communities, certain events, etc. But you do want them to know that you know what the hell you're talking about as much as you can.
Mhm.
In that instance, I typically suggest people use the words wisdom and knowledge. Like, yeah, I've got some knowledge and training on that. Or like, yes, I do have some of my own wisdoms from uh uh oh, it seems like a place that we have a mutual relatability on. But the piece there is the clinician's boundary, that I don't need to tell you exactly about my personal life. If you're uncomfortable not having a concrete and concise answer to that question, you have absolutely every ability to see a clinician who would be willing to provide it, or to ask for clarification about what you would feel more comfortable to normalize, validate, and feel seen and heard. But just as a client has their rights to privacy, so does a clinician. So that particular topic of kink disclosure, or even in couples counseling, like sexual disclosure, that those ones are a little sticky. So you have to be very, very um considerate to pre-existing knowledge you have about this client, your understanding of where they currently are at, what it would compromise for yourself, and if you feel comfortable. Because if you just immediately don't feel comfortable saying it, like, well, why do you ask? What would be more helpful for make you feel comfortable in this room, with feeling heard and seen and validated? Um, so I hope that answers the question a little bit.
And to the person to ask that and commented, uh, let us know if there's follow-up. So, uh, personal story on my side. A therapist that I had ongoingly, they moved, so things changed. But uh, it- obviously, totally knowing that I'm, kink enthusiastic, educator, blah blah blah, blah, and cis male therapist. Eventually, it was very clear from the beginning that I was looking for somebody queer and certainly kink friendly. After a while, I had questions about I had a scene that didn't go awesome, wasn't necessarily disastrous, but it didn't necessarily go awesome, and I thought that there might be a difference in gender perspective. So I asked, now I know is he's kinky, therapist going, okay, what's possibly going on in this head of the cis male person when this happened in this scene? Can you help me out? And it was really nice being able to ask that.
To have insight on the other piece of the equation of what you experienced.
Yeah, because different socialization, different um, bodily arrangement, different cultural stuff. And what was it like? What is it like for a cis guy for this to have happened? Obviously, speculating because the person's not in the room. It was really helpful to be able to ask, what's it like from a prostate penis owner perspective?
And this is the therapist, your therapist at the time had not
Right.
disclosed that he enjoys or has experienced prostate stimulation.
No, they had not disclosed that, and I still don't know, but knew that was kinky at some level or another. It was really helpful, and I also like kind of as a client, I kind of treaded the line of really what I want to know is what could the person not in the room been going through that I have absolutely no first person relatability to.
So right there, being able to ask for a specific notion of what it is you're looking from this insight. You're like, you're a dude. What would that be like for you? Is I get you're a woman. Is this how women respond to things in individual or couples counseling all the time? And it can be helpful to provide that,
Mhm.
but with that, it's like, well, for me, how I would respond, and people typically respond this way, and being able to provide some concepts, but also acknowledging in your description the pertinent limitations of never done that, but if it's anything like XYZ, I would assume it felt like this, and that they were kind of hoping to talk about this afterwards.
Yeah,
So being
yeah,
able to a more general piece there.
yeah. And it was a scene that had gone kind of sideways, so it was really nagging at me and like really affecting my own confidence and my did I fail in the communication? Am I not reading them right? Did I just do, it's like things technically went fine, but then it was kind of and I was doing some like emotional self-flagellation. So it was really nice having a therapist who, instead of going, I don't know about this, I'll need to Google it, was not the response. It was more the, yeah, okay, it could be this, this, or this.
Because they were able to look at the behavioral piece.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And
And knowing that they weren't just referring academically. So
yeah,
that was important, yeah. Um, and for folks who are kinky out there and seeking helping professionals and therapists, even if the topic that you're seeing them for is not about kink, It'd be nice if you're not being judged and the therapist not being squeaked about it and trying desperately to hide it, which apparently happens out there.
Oh, quite a lot.
Yeah. We have a question from uh, a Canadian colleague, and and I say that because they're not in the US, and they're asking, in the US, recognizing that it likely changes state by state, is there a mandate to report imminent harm to self or others, or is it only homicidal or suicidal intent?
Okay, so the mandated reporting, just point blank as the foundation piece, is abuse of children, the disabled, and elderly. You have to call as soon as possible. You can invite your client to be part of that call if they rather not. I still like to tell my clients that I will be making that call with the information that I have. If it is active homicidal ideation, you do have to call for a wellness check, which would be checking in with the local police to come in with their designated social worker. Cannot speak to the funding of whether a designated social worker is always on staff. The same with active suicidal ideation. So anyone who is an immediate danger to themselves or others is 302, I believe is the code we have here, which is involuntary hospitalization. Which voluntary is a little tricky there. Because if somebody gets called in, or if I have a client sitting here and we're calling in for a wellness check because they're SUI, HI, SI, all of these things, and the police come in and check with them and they don't want to go. And the police share with them, well, because of the rules and statutes, we have to bring you with us. So you either have the option to come willingly, which would be voluntary, or unwillingly, which would be involuntary. There's not much choice of consent in there, which is very difficult. Because when you're in a space where you need the most help, how much consent is an appropriate amount? Because many people will say, I don't want to go.
Hmm.
But I tell my clients, I would rather you hate me forever than be dead. That's where I stand on that.
I'm going to take that a little further.
Yeah.
Secret, consent, privacy. As a clinician, where have your struggle points been?
My struggle points have been, you know what? I'm going to say one that I've found required the most reflection on consent. And it may seem left field for many people, but working with clients with dissociative identity disorders, that's where I've struggled the most with consent. Because, and I know there are many people who do not believe that DID exists, and I am sorry to say that that is not true. It does. It is neurologically proven. When you've had a little bit more exposure and experience to it, you can understand the truth in that. But anyway, point is, people with dissociative identity disorder, or what was previously known as multiple personality disorder, those fractures exist in the human mind as walls, barriers between memories for self-preservation. Now, if one person comes in, one person who may be a system, which means a collection of identities, fractures, alters, in whatever way that looks, everyone's constellation is different. If they offer consent, but I then have a 6-year-old child in the room, I can't talk about what we were just talking about. And if your walls are built to specifically keep information away from each other, an even stronger rapport needs to be developed with clients so that they can have they can feel a sense of safety and skills and preparation for who a piece of information may be helpful to be exchanged with. But I'm not going to tell a 6-year-old child in an adult body, like, you have to fix this thing that you did when you crossed the line in kink or consent with somebody. So the most difficult time I've ever dealt with consent in my practice as a therapist is not just assuming consent for everyone because one body person told me. That makes sense. I know that's so complicated, but that you said what's the most complicated.
Mm-hmm.
That one's it.
Wow. Wow, that is really intense. See, this is why I don't do what you do. And thank you for doing
Doesn't
that.
get boring.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, mine's also interesting too, but it's very coach different than therapist. Yeah. Got another question from a professional colleague in regards to the mandated reporting. And by the way, thank you for sharing about that because it's something I've not thought of and something I've not had to deal with, and that is an incredibly nuanced consent issue that you have to navigate in the moment to understand who's in the room, I assume.
Mhm.
Wow. Okay. Um, Back to the mandating reporting and a follow-up query from the person. So danger is different from harm in this situation. I'm thinking of a kinky client talking about how much they're looking forward to a particularly hard scene. I don't know if I quite understand the question.
Hard, like hardcore or mental health?
I don't know. Could be either technically challenging, emotionally challenging, or physically intense. Hard could be a lot of different things. If the client says they're looking forward to a beating, for instance.
Oh, yeah, no, that's not self-harm. For me, that's not self-harm. I don't think for any therapist that should be self-harm. Because while there is the physical intimacy component, if I'm not making a phone call because you go to get a massage and someone's karate chopping your butt, I'm not gonna make a phone call because you and a friend are deciding to play with something to punch your butt or whatever it is there.
A rugby game.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
There's so many I actually have a friend who did a training with ER students regarding consent and discussing when people come in with bruising or injuries from consensual scenes. And that's something that more the medical field needs to be versed on, as well as the mental health field. But as a sex therapist, as a clinical sexologist, I'm not going to assume something that makes you happy is dangerous. I'm going to check in. What do y'all do for before care? What do you do for aftercare? What are your safe words? What are your contingency plans? Where are you guys doing this? Is it somewhere comfy, private? Like, I will help them curate the nicest little comfy cozy space for it to happen, to discuss the befores and afters, for the reflections and conversations they might want to have after. But I'm not going to make a phone call. But I do want to clarify real quick. Mandated reporting is about abuse. Wellness checks, mobile crisis, involuntary hospitalization is something different. When someone is a danger, it's involuntary hospitalization wellness checks and psych assessments. When it is somebody who is subject to harm or in the past has been subject to harm as a child, that's the mandated reporting. So if your state mandates you as a reporter, you're looking at child abuse, elder abuse, disabled, but the mandated piece of you reaching out to police escort for a voluntary or involuntary hospitalization is it's, you don't call the same people,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
I'm thinking from educator coach perspective. And I will hear something like, from my clients about, yeah, I got a big scene coming up. It's going to be really, I think there are, the same thing could be said in different ways with different knowledge I have about each of my students, right? So, example, if person A said, yeah, I've got a really intense scene coming up. It's going to be, I'm going to, bottom to a serious beatdown, and I'm a little scared. I'm a little it's going to be intense. I think it's going to be amazing. That's going to be a very different thing than I'm a bad person and I've arranged for a beatdown because I deserve it.
Now, my first question is to that second one, is that a kinky explanation of self, or was that a negative self emotion?
Right. Right. So for the first one, I would be like, like you, I'd be talking about uh, a scene design, right? And communication. To the second one, I would actually be digging in further, and there'll be in my decision flow chart, there'll be a point in which I'll be like, okay, I need you to arrange for a therapist. Because there's a difference between I've been a naughty boy. Then there's also a redemption journey scene, which I think is brilliant when it's self-designed. And then there is the reinforcing the negative and the belief that they are deserving of abuse, essentially. And that latter one is where I'm like, okay, I will support you to find another support.
Yes. In many a time, we have to provide the resources and not be the resource by recognizing where our limitations are, either as professionals or just human beings in general. My response would be similar to yours, as in, you say bad and you say deserving. I don't want to assume what you mean by that. So can you
Mhm.
just explain a little bit more for me? Not a trick question. I use the phrase not a trick question so much in my practice because a lot of people have been faced with trick questions or answering honestly and it being weaponized against them.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh-huh.
but so at that point, I would start to look at the piece of what makes you feel that you are deserving of punishment. Is this
Yeah.
someone else's is this a family of origin narrative that you are bad, or is this you using shadow work, trauma reenactment to address family of origin narratives that you are bad? Or is this just, like you said, I've been a bad boy, and it's like, oh cool, awesome, you guys are gonna have a great time, let's talk about what that's gonna look like. But really the discernment there being, when you say bad, what do you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because that answer in and of itself will start to give you the rest of the context for the follow-up questions.
Oh my God, I'm just realizing that we have just a bit of time left.
Oh,
And I may actually, if you don't mind, I'd love to invite you more there's some other really good questions. But why do I have gummy candies?
oh,
Why
beautiful.
did you asked me to, and do you realize how hard it is for me to be sitting here with a handful of, yes, for gummy bears, but I had fruit snacks. I'm sitting here with really, really tasty actual 100% fruit juice gummy snacks. You know, I actually even make those when I'm going hiking. You're killing me. Why am I having these?
All right. Well, one of the pieces, I know we covered a bunch of content, and it led us into different areas of valid question. But one of the areas that I wanted to touch on is, just as I did my office tour, how to provide consent doing an exercise with clients. And I have a gummy exercise. You only need one gummy for this, but I want to be able to display how to ask for consent when you're doing an exercise that you can't give the end away, kind of thing. Ooh, strawberry, perfect shape. Love it. All right. Well, would you like to participate in a mindfulness exercise? I'll explain a little bit about it to you, and you can tell me if it's something you're comfortable with.
Yes, I consent to hearing about what this is about and
Beautiful.
then deciding.
Beautiful. So, how do you feel about gummy bears?
Love them.
Good. So glad to hear it. If you didn't like them, I was going to ask you about Swedish fish. So, with gummy bears, we're going to have this activity. I have them right over here. I'm going to give you one instruction. Then I'm going to talk. And then I'm going to stop talking. And then I might talk a little bit more. And then the exercise is over. We reflect on the experience. And then we reflect on your thoughts and emotions about it. So, with those sequential pieces, how do you feel about doing this gummy exercise?
I'm up for it.
Alrighty. Well, I am going to give you one instruction. Let me get the timer set here on my phone. I'm going to give you one instruction, and that is to take a single gummy and put it face down on your tongue.
My tongue? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, we're not going to suck on. Oh.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And we're going to close our mouth.
Mm.
We're not going to push it against the roof of our mouth. We're not going to suck on it. We're not going to chew. We're not going to swallow our saliva. We're going to keep that gummy on our tongue like a table. After a while, you might notice that that table starts to become a boat. But it's okay. We're just going to keep it in that boat. And again, our focus is on keeping that gummy bear there. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time where I shut the hell up. And I'll check in with you when we're a little bit closer. Sure, at this point, we're having some organic salivary responses. Remind and encourage you. Mission is to keep it in the boat. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Doing it. Doing a great job. Yeah, almost in the home stretch. All right. You can eat or spit out that gummy bear as you so choose. It takes a little bit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.
So there are two purposes of this exercise, and I'm going to use your chewing time to do a little bit more of my talking here. Yeah, where there are two purposes to this exercise. First one, I'm going to ask you, how long do you think you were doing that exercise for?
A minute?
You did that exercise for 2 minutes and 15 seconds.
Oh, okay.
And what was coming into your head when you were doing the exercise? Was laundry list? I can hear the birds in the background. What's going on as you're focused on this gummy bear?
Am I going to start drooling out of the corner of my mouth?
All your focus is right here. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
So the first thing this teaches us is that when we use as many sensory intentions as possible, flavor, taste, texture, when we have a goal, a mission, when we are putting so much intention into something, the noise can quiet.
Hmm.
And everyone deserves 2 minutes of peace every day at the very least. And the second piece that we learn is
Is
even,
that 2 minutes of peace or 2 minutes of frustration?
well, I guess it depends on, are you masochist or not? No.
Uh-huh.
I know some people who like to do it even longer. It's a little meditative for them. They'll put it in the freezer. And I'm like,
Mm.
good on you. I don't have that
Mm-hmm.
much patience because I will get distracted. But 2 minutes seems to be a perfect amount of time where people don't start counting, etc. But the second piece of this exercise is that even though you were not in charge of your salivary gland response, you got to decide if you were going to swallow your saliva, if you were going to chew, if you were going to talk. So while you might not have control over your entire physiology, you have more control over your life and what you do with it than you might initially believe.
Neat. Hmm. And you share this with your clients, yeah?
I do that every first initial session because it
Mm-hmm.
lays again the consent of what exercises will look like in the future,
Mm-hmm.
and it gives them a little more confidence. And people generally like getting candy when they go to an appointment. They like
Yeah.
that at the doctor or toys at the dentist. So,
Mm-hmm.
and then I give them
Mm.
some. I go, keep these in your car. They're little 5 packs. Keep these in your car for when you need them.
Nice. And there's also sugar-free models for people who need that, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Um, for little aside from my side, for those of you who have therapists and mental health professionals who you feel like could use a little extra education around kink, I have a PDF of my presentation that I did for ASET, which Alyssa, I think are you familiar with my appetite grid and my reframed um, uh, active definitions of kink PDF?
I haven't seen the
So
PD. We did discuss the content, so I
yeah,
would have a copy of that as well.
okay, I'll totally send that. It's for any of you out there watching this, I'm happy to make that available for you to share with your therapist as a way that you can save your therapeutic hour. So that is available. Um, and I will put that, uh, hit me up for it. I will share that. I think I also have it in my Patreon as well. I think I'll make it a free resource in my Patreon. Do you have homework assignment or something for our lovely viewers?
Oh, okay. Other than challenging people to the gummy bear exercise, um, something I'm trying to think. What are the most common homeworks I do with people? Um, hmm, that's a couples one. That's a couples one. Uh, the couples tend to get all the good homeworks. Oh, beautiful. If anyone is having difficulty with the grind of adulthood and they're just
Mhm.
they want that whimsy of being a child again, we can't go back, but we can lean into neuroplasticity. So what I would encourage you to do as a homework is to find your favorite treat from when you were a kid, whether it's a DQ Blizzard or whether it's a Happy Meal, whatever it is, something that makes you feel good. I like YooHoo, something that makes you feel good, and to make a list of all the things that you loved as a kid, whether it was Skippets, whether it was candy, and really start to remember the sensations that came along with those while you're engaging in an active uh, uh, an active reminder of what it was like in those spaces. So your homework is to make a list of things that brought the whimsy that you miss and to lean into them, watch those shows, eat that candy, all the while having that treat that always made you smile. And have fun with it. Yes, absolutely. Put the little olives on your fingers or the Fritos. Do, do what makes you feel like a kid again. And that's how we activate as close to getting that as
I
possible.
love I love it. There was another question here that was possibly a little bit outside the scope of things. I'm hoping that um, that might make for a nice question in my office hours on Patreon. Uh, Gosh, I really appreciate you coming on and talking about this, and it's always a pleasure. I would love to turn to the attendees, and if you have uh, comments for Ilyssa, or particularly would love to know something that really grabbed your attention about our conversation here, or just plain old thanks. That'd be great.
I'll take note
And
if it's moving.
yeah, and there is, you might want to take a look at the Q&A question that we didn't address. Might be something interesting for you to, can you see that? Yeah.
Oh, wait. I can see the thank yous at the bottom. You're welcome.
Oh, click on Q&A and you'll see one that's still open.
Beautiful. Okay.
Okay.
This person said, you talked briefly about boundaries and
Yeah,
friendship.
you can take a look at that on your own.
Oh, would you like me to answer it now or
No, just put it in your head. We might address it another time.
you got it? Let me just.
And we have a, let me see if I can copy that down. I've copied that. I will email that question to you. Okay. So,
Oh, okay, beautiful.
yeah, I will just email that. And so that way you can address that separately. I think it's a great question, but slightly outside of the scope of things. We have, somebody said, appreciated the conversation very much. Thank you kindly. Another writes, thank you both so much. And for those of you here and watching later on, please continue to go out there and build your consent muscle because it matters. I'm going to, at this point, say pause the recording and say official bye to those who are viewing later. And for those of you who are here live, you're welcome to stick around.